Thanks so much for being here with us, Lynn.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. So how is it? We're talking about kindness today, which it's interesting because I think a lot of people who might consider themselves more codependent have an easier time being kind and compassionate to others and a harder time being kind and compassionate to themselves. So why do you think that is?
Well, I would have to go back to our childhood development to talk about that. And many people now are very familiar with Gabor Mate and his work. And one of the things that he talks about is how you have to co-regulate. Parents and children have to co-regulate. And also there's a survival system of we need to be included, especially as a child, but as an adult too. And that need for inclusion is a survival level need, and it drives a lot of codependence. It drives a lot of inclusion issues of I need to do whatever it takes to stay included. And when we're a child, that often takes the form of doing whatever we have to do to maintain the connection with the adult. So if there's something going wrong in the home, if there's addiction or abuse or violence or something, then the children will take that on themselves because the only way that they could have an opportunity to change that is if they believe it's their fault. And that's the root of a lot of core deficiency beliefs, of beliefs that, we have an experience that we're not loved, and then we believe that we're not lovable. And that drives almost all of the dysfunction in adult relationships as well. So we have this, we come into our adult life. For me, it was emotional abandonment. I wasn't parented in a way that was connected to my heart. I got good food, I got the dance lessons, the music lessons, all that, but I didn't have any sense that somebody really knew me or cared about me, and that nobody protected me. So when things started to go wrong when I was a teenager, I knew that I couldn't go to my parents. I knew nobody was going to protect me. And then as an adult, I became very vulnerable to being in a relationship where someone protected me. They also controlled me, but at that time I couldn't see what was really happening. So to get to the reasons why we are vulnerable and why we're kind of desperate in relationships, it has to do with this need for inclusion. And Stephen Porges talks about the polyvagal system and how we have to be in a state of trust, the ventral vagal system, of a state of trust in our nervous system. So we have this unconscious perception of threat and safety. And if we don't feel safe, we're going to do whatever we need to do to try to get to that feeling of safety. So that's what underlies a lot of what we're looking at here.
Yeah, something that you said a couple minutes ago really struck me was right when we're young, and I think it was something along the lines of if gosh, I'm trying to remember what it was now. I actually related it to like my own personal experience of my parents fighting. That was like one of my first
Mhm,
moments that I remember trying to control something. That
mhm,
codependent tendency to try to control the environment, and
right.
right, thinking it was my fault. That was it. Right. So if it was
Mhm,
my fault, then I'm going to be able to fix them. Right. I'm going to be able to fix
right,
their relationship,
right.
and my
Yeah.
5-year-old me is going to be able to make it all better again. So yeah,
And
that
then, of
that's
course, it doesn't work because it wasn't our fault in the first place. But then we feel powerless and helpless, and we turn on ourselves. And so many people have that really mean inner critic. That's what's the matter with you? We feel ashamed of ourselves. We have a profound disconnection from ourselves. And so when we're getting to why is it we're able to feel more kindness towards somebody else, partly it's because we have this internal dissonance of something was wrong with me and it's my fault that I couldn't make it work. And
Mhm.
so if we can look at a situation where, for instance, if I'm in a certain situation and I think about someone I care about in that situation, I'll often feel a lot more kindness and compassion for them. But when I think about it for me, I blame myself. And that's part of the reason why we don't have that compassion.
Mhm.
The other thing too is there's a huge mechanism of disconnection that happens. So one of the ways that we cope as a child, because we don't have a job, we can't go out and get our own place when we're 6 years old, but we can disconnect from what's going on. So we daydream, or, I don't know how many kids daydream now. Mostly they're probably on their video games. There's a lot more ready distractions, but we do all of these things to kind of disappear and to make it a little bit easier to cope, and to be in our own hearts and to have kindness for ourselves. Sounds kind of simple, but it's actually a very deep developmental step that we can connect with ourselves again. And we're always trying to avoid pain and feeling helpless. And so to come into our own heart and to have that kindness for ourselves is harder than it sounds.
Mhm. Yeah, I'd imagine it would be based on like, right, the state of so many people's lives and what we go
Mhm.
through. We're not necessarily very kind to ourselves. So let's go back to the nervous system, Lynn. I know that you like to look at at relationships through a nervous system lens. So why is that? And you kind of touched on it before, but why is that?
Mhm. Well, I think actually I look at everything in life through a nervous system lens, and including relationships, which are very affected by that. So neuroception is our perception of safety and threat, inclusion, and it's unconscious. And it's formed by every experience we've ever had. So our nervous system, our nervous system is skewed for negativity. And Rick Hansen talks about that, where um, Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. So one of the things that we can do to work with that is to just acknowledge that's how it works. Our nervous system, our primitive brain is primitive, and it was developed in a way to protect us from physical threats, tigers behind bushes, that kind of thing. So if we didn't take every threat, if we weren't hyper vigilant, our ancestors would not have made it through. So in that sense, the hypervigilance really works. But in the sense of what we're talking about now with people is every time we've ever been hurt by someone, that's what comes to mind when we hear that tone of voice or when we see somebody that reminds us of that person who hurt us. And so because we're skewed for negativity and we're always trying to protect ourselves, what happens is we kind of protect ourselves out of connection. So we also need connection as a human being. We need safety, which is an absence of threat, but it's also connection. So our nervous system is what determines that. And we can't think our way out of feeling threatened. We can't think our way into thinking, well, people are safe for me if our experience has been that they hurt us. So we have to regulate our nervous system in order for that to happen. And as our nervous system regulates, then we can start to feel safer because we're not going to be so alarmed. We won't be so hyper vigilant. And so right now, in the last several years, Peter Levine's work and trauma specialists like Resma Menakem and all of the different people now that are working with somatic mindfulness, we have so many ways to regulate our nervous system. And, one of them is just to hold our own hand and to feel that comfort and support of our own hands, or to take long exhalations, 6-second exhalations, soothe our nervous system. And our nervous system is really cued in for the tension in our bodies. So if we relax our body, that's a cue of safety. If we have a deeper out breath, it's a cue that it's safe to breathe. Because if a predator is near, we're going to hold our breath. And how many people hold their breath when they're upset? So often I'll be working with someone and I'll say, "Are you breathing?" And they're like, "Nope, I was holding my breath." Because that's what our nervous system does. It drives that. And so learning to manage our nervous system and learning to recognize when we're kind of charged up and then how to downregulate our system, that's what enables us to be present with our own heart and to be present, really present with somebody else. Otherwise, we're in a fight, flight, freeze, fawn. We're in a kind of a survival mode. And that's not a very good way to live our life.
Yeah, I love all that. One of the things I just took a note about was we protect ourselves out of connection. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
That is so it, right? Like it's this mechanism that obviously got humanity where we are today, and very
Yeah.
grateful for that. And yet, yeah, in the world we live in today, it's not needed in the same way. So that
It's
is
not, no. And when we're overly protective, we also don't have an accurate sense of threat perception.
right.
So some people who actually could hurt us, we're missing it because we're just kind of too stressed, too alarmed. We have to be kind of settled in our body to notice who's safe and who's not.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So let's talk a little bit deeper about safety. You mentioned Stephen Porges a little bit ago, and you talk about his quote, "Safety is the treatment." So can you
Mm.
explain a little bit about how this applies to our relationships with ourself as well as with others?
Right, for sure. Well, and then we get back to the inner critic. Um, if somebody else talked to us the way we talk to ourselves, we probably wouldn't want to hang around them. And having an inner critic, there's lots of reasons for that. Oftentimes it's the voice of a parent or, someone who was contemptuous or shaming of ourselves when we were children. And then we kind of take that on. Some of it is just the culture that we live in is very pushy and aggressive. People aren't really approved of. We don't feel included and approved of. Mostly we're kind of trying to hustle for approval and inclusion. And so we get that inner critic, which can stop us. The purpose of shame is to stop us from doing something that will get us kicked out.
AVAIYA has changed my life.
AVAIYA has made me the woman I am today.
AVAIYA is my home.
AVAIYA is personal freedom.
AVAIYA is the reason my life continuously improves.
Let everyone in your life know about AVAIYA.
Everyone needs to know about this amazing company.
Thank you, AVAIYA, for appearing in my inbox.
What Ike Allen and Andy Anderson have created at AVAIYA is what the world needs.